Hello everybody, this is Obergefeiter Heisler, otherwise known as Heer Captain from YouTube. Today I'm going to be talking about the German uniform and a lot of the equipment and medals that were involved in the German army in World War II. But first I'm going to start with my uniform, and the second part of the video will be the equipment and the different medals that were used in the German military during that time. There may be one, two parts, or maybe a third part, probably because there's a lot to review. But first I'm going to start with my uniform. First with my helmet. The model I am wearing is called M1935. That was the first model helmet issued, in which the helmet edges were rolled inward to make a nice clean, unsharp edge. There were 3 helmets that were developed. This one being the M1935, there was a M1940 and M1942 helmet. The M35 and 40 had rolled helmet edges. The M1942 did not. And that was because production during the war at that time was very slow and their factories were being destroyed, so they left the helmet edges sharp. They did not roll them under. Now we go down to the collar. This, by the way, is the M1936 German Army uniform. The Waffen SS had a similar uniform, but there was some customization. We may get into that later. The collar tabs. In the German Army, there was a generic collar that could be used for any division, such as artillery, reconnaissance, signals, pioneer, etc. But they had specific coloring. And these are called Litzen. And the one I'm wearing has yellow stripes. And that stands for reconnaissance. There were many different types of Litzen, though, you could use for every branch in the German army. Now we go to the shoulder boards, excuse me. They reflected the same piping that your Litzen had. Piping is the edging color of your shoulder boards and in the middle of your collar Litzen. The shoulder boards, consequently, since my collar Litzen is reconnaissance, the shoulder boards are reconnaissance. Then we get a little closer to the breast eagle, which is this right here. Breast eagles in the German army for enlisted men, which includes enlisted and non-commissioned officers, were usually something called bevo. And that was printed material in factories. They printed those out on rolls. And those were standard issue. However, if you wanted a slightly nicer quality eagle, you could purchase one. By the way, people, embroidered and, bullion eagles were not only limited to officers. If you could afford the higher quality material, you could very well buy a higher quality eagle. The one I'm wearing is silver threaded, and this is an early 1935-36 style eagle, but it has silver threading. It's a nicer quality than the bevo. And now for the buttons on the uniform. They are pebbled buttons, and they are subdued, which means they're fairly dull black in color. For enlisted uniforms, this was the case, but for officers, junior and senior officers would have silver pebbled buttons. And once you reach general officer, of course, the color associated with a general is usually gold. So once you became a general officer, your buttons changed from silver pebbled to gold. What else can I say about the uniform? There were several uniform models made at that time. Mine I'm wearing is the M1936. An interesting fact about the uniform that many people debate about is during the German army years in World War II, people, there was no specific or considered appropriate uniform that was to be worn at that time. Any model of the German uniforms that were created were acceptable to be used during the wartime. The Germans had many more concerns than what style uniform you were wearing. In other words, if I was wearing an M1936 uniform when it was 1944, it doesn't matter. It is identified as German because you have all the components, especially the breast eagle. It did not matter what style uniform you were wearing. The Germans wanted to win the war, and that's what they cared about. They didn't care about what model uniform you were wearing. It was a big difference. We can talk about my belt and the belt buckle. This is the German Army belt buckle here, and this is the German Army belt. These belts were used to secure your equipment to the belt, and we'll get into the equipment in the second half. The German model belt buckle, let me try to show you this. The details of this belt buckle read Gott mit uns, which stood for God is with us. And of course in the center you have the German eagle clutching the swastika. And my model is a steel. There were steel made belt buckles as well as aluminum made, and mine is a steel model. These were leather belts. They could be adjusted. There's a hook on the inside with a clasp that you hook it onto. These were mainly served as equipment belts. There were dressage belts. They had a higher shine to them for parade duties. So that would be the belt. Now I can discuss the medal on the pocket. The medal I am wearing here on the left breast pocket is called the Iron Cross, First Class. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this award. You should be. It is a very famous and popular award. Carried over from World War I. The Iron Cross, First Class, stood for the same thing. However, there were slight changes in criteria. Of course, almost with any award that would have carried over in World War II or been created in World War II would have included a swastika. There were not many medals or awards in World War II in the German military that would not have included a swastika. That was just the dress code. Of course, Hitler was in command at that time, and he would have required a swastika on almost everything to support his Nazi ideals in Germany at the time. And then you have the pants. These are standard model pants that went along with the M36 uniform, However, they could have been worn with no problem with any other uniform. Remember, there was no accepted or specific uniform you had to wear at that time. All of them were appropriate. And then you get down to the jack boots. These are standard enlisted and NCO jack boots. Now, when you became an officer, some of them still wore these jack boots because, of course, they were in the field in combat situations. They may have not wanted to ruin their nice dress boots that came a little slightly higher up to the knee. And these include hobnails, which are on the heels. Heel irons would have been located in the heel, you can hear it. And towards the front of the shoe underneath were things called hobnails, which were to give you some structure and support and some strength for the combat boots. Alright guys, so the next part of the video, in the next half of the video, we're going to be discussing a little table I've set up over there and some other equipment that the German military would have used. This is Obergefeiter Heisler, otherwise known as AKA Herr Captain from YouTube, and stay tuned for the second part.